Hi guys, and welcome to today's lesson. Well, first of all, I hope you're all doing well, and I hope you're benefiting some from these virtual lessons. With regard to today's lesson, I'm just going to walk you through some of the rhetoric that you were working with in our last lesson when you were analyzing parts of George W. Bush's State of the Union speech from 2003. After this, I have attached another link, and if you follow that link, you are led to a movie, Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 movie from 2004. Michael Moore was a staunch critic of the Iraq War, and well, if you watch his movie, you'll see why that was. Anywho, with regards to the State of the Union speech by George W. Bush, we have it right here in front of us. And I'm just going to walk you through some of the main tools of rhetoric being used in these examples that you were working with. If we look at the first extract, we see, as we fight this war, we will remember where it began here in our own country. Because that first line is really a reference to 9/11, and is supposed to sort of evoke the feelings of every American listening to this. 9/11 at this point in time, of course, is something that is associated with a huge amount of emotions. So there's a clear pathos element in the reference to 9/11, just there. As he goes on, he says, this government is taking unprecedented measures to protect our people and defend our homeland. We've intensified security at the borders and ports of entry. We've posted more than 50,000 newly trained federal screeners in airports, begun inoculating troops and first responders against smallpox, and are deploying the nation's first early warning network of sensors to detect biological attacks. And this year, for the first time, we are beginning to feel a defense to protect this nation against ballistic missiles. So what we have here is really George W. Bush listing all of the things that his government, his administration has done to protect Americans. So in that way, he is really boosting his own credibility. He's saying, look at how good me and my administration, look how good we are at protecting you. So in that, we definitely have an element of ethos, since it's his own credibility that he is boosting. Look at all we have done. Now, you may be able to argue that, well, in there also lies some aspect of logos appeal, in the sense that he's saying this government is taking unprecedented measures to protect our people and defend our homeland, and then he's listing what it is they've done. So there is some sort of logical coherence to that argument. Right. All right, if we move on, he says, I thank Congress for supporting these measures. I ask you tonight to add to our future security with a major research and production effort to guard our people against bioterrorism called Project BioShield. The budget I send you will propose almost $6 billion to quickly make available effective vaccines and treatments against agents like anthrax, botulinum toxin, Ebola, and plague. We must assume that our enemies would use these diseases as weapons, and we must act before the dangers are upon us. Now, in that paragraph, we have the obvious bits, which are, of course, his direct speech. I ask you tonight. We also have an extensive use of these collective pronouns, right? Our people, we, and so forth, right? We must assume. These collective pronouns are being used to create this sense of union among the listeners to the speech, right? Good. Finally, he's using terms such as anthrax, Ebola, plague, very loaded words, words that are supposed to sort of cause an emotional response, right? Something that people fear in general. Okay, moving on to the next paragraph. He says, our war against terror is a contest of will in which perseverance is power. In the ruins of two towers at the western wall of the Pentagon on a field in Pennsylvania, this nation made a pledge, and we renew that pledge tonight. All right, what he's doing here is, again, he's giving all of these references to every aspect of the 9/11 attacks, right? We see that the ruins of two towers is a reference to the World Trade Center. The western wall of the Pentagon is a reference to the plane that hit the Pentagon, and the reference to a field in Pennsylvania where well, that's where the plane, the United 93, went down when the passengers stormed the cockpit and made the airplane crash before it was able to hit some unknown target. Okay, so these references to 9/11 again is an element of pathos, supposed to evoke feelings among the audience. Whatever the duration of this struggle, he says, and whatever the difficulties, we will not permit the triumph of violence in the affairs of men. Free people will set the course of history. We'll get back to this later on, but the use of the word free is definitely a conscious word choice, which is something that he does a lot more later on in his speech. All right, the third paragraph goes, this threat is new. America's duty is familiar. Throughout the 20th century, small groups of men seized control of great nations, built armies and arsenals, and set out to dominate the weak and intimidate the world. In each case, their ambitions of cruelty and murder had no limit. In each case, the ambitions of Hitlerism, militarism, and communism were defeated by the will of free peoples, by the strength of great alliances, and by the might of the United States of America. Now in this century, the ideology of power and domination has appeared again. What he is making here is a comparison. A comparison between World War II and the Cold War. So the references to Hitlerism and communism, well, those are references to these two key events in American history. And he's trying to draw strength to his current cause by comparing it to these two historical events that we all have very firm perceptions of, right? We know who were the good guys and who were the bad guys. So he's trying to draw strength from the feelings that the audience has toward these two events to this event. He's just saying it's the same, right? He's saying now in this century, the ideology of power and domination has appeared again. So again, we're dealing with Hitlerism and communism. These two concepts are also, in an American context anyway, very loaded words. I think we've talked about this before, that maybe the most loaded word in the world really is Hitler, right? Once again, this nation and all our friends are all that stand between a world at peace and a world of chaos and constant alarm. Once again, we are called to defend the safety of our people and the hopes of all mankind, and we accept this responsibility. Well, the repetition of once again, just underscores the fact, it underscores the comparison between Hitlerism and communism and this fight against terrorism. It's the same thing, according to George Bush. And we all know that World War II and the Cold War was worth fighting, so this war is worth fighting just the same way. moving on to the last paragraph you were asked to look at, we have George W. Bush saying, Americans are a free people who know that freedom is the right of every person and the future of every nation. The liberty we prize is not America's gift to the world, it is God's gift to humanity. Well, here we have a very conscious word choice using terms such as free, freedom, and liberty. Now, these terms are, in an American context, loaded words. They are some of the most reoccurring words in the founding documents of the United States. Free, freedom, liberty, those values, those terms have a very distinct meaning for almost all Americans. So it's no coincidence that he ends his speech using these terms. And finally, he says that these values are God's gift to humanity. So the use of the word God, and especially in an American context, is also a very loaded word. God plays a much bigger role in American politics than he does in Danish politics. Alrighty, moving on to the second task you were supposed to work with in the last lesson. You were asked to create a list of the number of times during his speech that George W. Bush uses words from the semantic field of danger. Now, words, plural, yes. Let's just quickly run through the speech. I've highlighted every word belonging to that semantic field here, and you can really see just how big a role this semantic field of fear or danger plays in the speech. A time of great consequence, terrible disease, danger, enemy, threatens, days of reckoning, whirlwind, peril, terrorists, fight, smallpox, warning, biological attack, ballistic missiles, bioterrorism, anthrax, botulinum, toxin, Ebola, plague, enemies, disease, weapons, dangers, and he goes on and on and on and on and on and on, right up until the end of the speech, where he sort of eases up a little bit and focuses on different things. But just the occurrence of all of these terms related to the semantic field of danger is a very clear example of what George W. Bush and his administration was criticized immensely for. The claim was that the government, the president, was trying to keep the population in a state of fear so that they would have an easier playing field, that they would have access to do whatever they really wanted to do. And some of the new laws that were introduced at this point in time really was groundbreaking, in the sense that the notion of privacy was no longer as important for Americans as it had been before. For example, the government was given free access to the content of private phone conversations without having to require a court order. So a lot of this was immensely criticized by different people. One of the most sort of noteworthy critics of this new legislation, which was called the Patriot Act, well, one of the most noteworthy critics was the director Michael Moore. And in 2004, he made a movie which was very critical towards George W. Bush and his administration and the way that they had conducted themselves in the aftermath of 9/11. And that is the movie that you have a link for and that I want you to use the rest of today's lesson to watch. All right, have fun. I'll see you guys.